Hi guys, Pete here for Hucking Aces. Today, I'm reviewing the Kastaplast Berg. The Berg is Kastaplast's first offering as a putt and approach disc, and honestly it's one of my favorites. I actually liked it so much during testing that it never left my bag. So let's talk about it a little bit. The most noticeable thing about it is that it's got a recessed, it's got like a little thumb groove all across the top, kind of like a Banger GT, except you can kind of see that the entire flight plate actually is recessed, not just like one groove. But that actually helps a lot with my thumb placement. I'm not sure if it's a gimmick or if it's to help it fly, but I know that it works really, really well for me. Speaking of flight, this thing right here is one of the straightest discs I've ever thrown, especially for a putt and approach. You can, if you really, really crank on it, you can get a very small amount of turn on it, and a very, very consistent and a little bit of fade at the end. But for the most part, this thing is going to be dead straight when you throw it. Another thing about it is that it has no glide whatsoever. A lot of people don't like that because it's going to cut down on distance, but again, this is a putt and approach disc, and Kastaplast really nailed it because this is a disc you don't really have to worry about overthrowing your target. You know that when you throw it, regardless of the wind conditions and stuff like that, it's going to perform consistently, and you're not going to really, really overthrow your target unless you just had a really bad shot and you didn't know what you were doing. But once you get used to this, it's really going to save you some strokes in your game, because if it doesn't make it into the basket, it's going to land right next to that for a drop-in putt. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the speed on this thing. Kastaplast has us at a speed 1, and I tend to agree with that. Its official flight ratings are a 1, a 1, a 0, and a 2. And I think that's pretty accurate. There is a small amount of fade at the end, but there's really no glide whatsoever. Very, very little turn. If you really crank on it, you can get that. But for the most part, it flies nice and true. Another thing about this disc actually is the plastic. It's really nice and soft, which is another thing that really helps as far as the disc sticking when it lands. There's a couple throws that I had where I'd hit the side of the basket and it just hits and drops. Same thing when it hits the ground. It's not gonna do anything crazy. It's soft enough to where it's just gonna hit, drop, and stay, so you can drop it in. So let's take a couple looks at some throws that I did, and then we'll go back with my final opinions. Alright, so there you have it. That was the Berg in action. As you can see, it's a very, very accurate disc with minimal glide that's really got some great sticking power in the basket and around the basket. I highly recommend putting one in your bag, because I really think you're going to see the same benefit to your game that I saw. So definitely check it out, and stay tuned for our next review. Thank you.